Well, gang, I have officially reached the next rung on the ladder of nerdiness. I have read the entirety of George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series. Just the first 5 books, not any of the extra books or short stories or guides or anything like that, but just the 5 books that he has written so far, because we're still waiting on Winds of Winter. It'll come, guys, it'll come. As you can see, I had the beautiful leather versions behind me. Look at these beautiful things. So I was able to read out of very cool looking editions. But I've done it. I've read the book series. It took me about a year. I'm a slow reader because I'm very busy, but I do like to read when I can. So it took me about a year, but I have finally recently finished A Dance with Dragons. Boy, I want to talk about it. Obviously, everyone and their mom has heard of this series for many years now because of the explosive success of the television series. And it's been something I've wanted to get into for a long time. You know, I'm in a constant quest to increase my level of nerdiness. You know what I mean? I took the D&D threshold. You know, I'm slowly becoming a gamer also, and playing some video games. I'm crossing that threshold. Lord of the Rings, I've reached, you know, all that kind of stuff, but there's still some nerdiness thresholds that I still hadn't attained yet. So I know that I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to get to A Song of Ice and Fire eventually. And I finally did. You know, next is Warhammer 40K. No, I'm kidding. Well, you know, who knows? We'll see. But I knew I wanted to get to it for a while, and of course I had also heard of it too because the show was so popular. To be clear, I've only really read the books. I've only watched the first 3 seasons of the TV series, so I will not be speaking on the show a lot. I might mention it a little bit. But this video is not about that. It's about the books. So if you have read the books, you like them just as much as I do, by the way. I love them. Spoiler alert for my review. They're awesome. I want to talk about them. Then that's what this video is about. So yeah, I don't have a ton of knowledge about this show just because I haven't seen very much of it. So I can't speak to it a lot. We're going to be going into pretty major spoilers for the books. All 5 of them. So if you don't care about spoilers, or if you've read the books as well, then you should be good. If you haven't, don't watch here. I'm going to spoil some really big things. Go read them, guys. Read these books. They're incredible. They're going to blow your socks off. They're really amazing. So go read them, and then come back later in a year when your heart has been broken by George R. R. Martin because he keeps killing off your favorite character, and join me as we talk about this series. Obviously, there are so many aspects to this book series. There's so many pieces and parts of it to talk about. It was very hard for me to come up with like the script for this video and stuff like that, just because there's so many pieces and parts to talk about. So instead, I'm going to just kind of talk about it very naturally and just let one topic flow into another naturally, and just it'll be a bit more of a free-form sort of video than a super structured sort of video. But just because I think that's how my brain works best, and I think it works really well because there's just so many things to talk about. I wanted to start talking about the prose, because really that's the first thing that stands out to you whenever you start reading a book. And I think it's really, really important when it comes to this book series. Now, obviously, the world building, the lore, the characters, the story is very, very strong, and we're going to talk about all those. And that's the main reasons that it got so popular. But I think an underrated and under-talked about aspect of this book series is George R. R. Martin's prose. His writing style is really my favorite writing style. I love the kind of old-timey, you know, Tolkien-esque writing, but it's not too cryptic and archaic that it gets boring or hard to understand. It fits the world and the setting and the medieval vibe very, very well, while also being modern enough in the way that it explains things and does dialogue and all that kind of stuff that me, as someone in 2023, can read it and be okay. You know what I mean? Understand what's going on. It's not super Shakespearean, but it has the poetry of Shakespeare, Tolkien-esque in the writing. The way he describes, and boy does he describe, he describes everything that the characters see, and the outfits and the locations and the battles and stuff. But it's all written in a very, it's clear what he's saying, but it's beautiful in the way that he describes things. He uses lots of simile, metaphor, poetry, and stuff like that, and just the way he structures his sentences and the way he words things is just like, wow. Like, the plot and all the characters in the world are strong enough to stand on their own, as we've seen from the television series being so successful. But the prose itself is really underrated. I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it in the community, though I've only been a part of the community for a short bit, obviously. It's I think it's really underrated. A lot of people talk about it, but it's what really drew me in initially, and really what never stopped being strong. His writing style never dips in quality, in my opinion. There are some dips in quality in regards to character choices and plot things and stuff like that, I think. I have a few complaints about that sort of stuff, but the writing style is always strong. Every chapter, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like a treat. It's a delicious treat to read his writing and the way that he describes things. I would read anything this guy wrote because of how it really is just the cherry on top. It's the icing on the cake, which is already delicious on its own, but it just makes the way that we are able to consume the world is through his writing style, and his writing style is amazing. Okay. The world, guys, the world of Ice and Fire, Westeros, Essos, whatever, is, as you guys know, maybe the greatest fictional setting I've ever discovered before. There's obviously ones that I love. There is Middle-earth, right? There's the world of Mass Effect that I love, stuff like that. But this world, this is something that, I'm already a nerd of. Just by reading the books, you become a historian. You become so well versed in the lore of this world, in its geography, kingdoms, characters, its history. Boy, does this world have such a rich history. And you just get like tastes of it and mentions of it, and it's just slowly revealed to you over time in just the most compelling way ever. The way that the world functions, the way the magic system is, and the way that dragons and monsters are involved, and like religion, and it's just exceptional, guys. It's just exceptional, and this world is so real and so alive. The fact that all of this came from the mind of one man is, I know it's been many decades, so he's had a lot of time to work on it, but it really is astounding. It's really probably going to be one of, if not the most fleshed out fictional setting you will ever see, ever read about. Obviously, Middle-earth is obviously another contender that I would say is very rich in history, lore, stuff like that as well. But I feel like I have so much knowledge of this world just because I've read the series. I know so much about this world. It's like I live there. Like, I just know so much about the different royal houses and their interactions and the history of the Targaryens and all that kind of stuff. And so it's obviously so rich, and its identity is very strong. It doesn't try to be a conglomerate of fantasy things. I think so much fantasy nowadays is so generic. It's so just like, let's just throw all fantasy things together. The high fantasy kind of vibe. But it's strong. It's medieval fantasy. It's gritty, it's grounded, it's low magic, it's depressing and dark and based around war, intrigue, but its medieval identity is exceptionally strong. Clearly, George R. R. Martin did his research. He clearly knows a lot about medieval times, because this world is very grounded in the medieval vibe, just when it comes to jousts and the things that they eat and the level of technology they have and their culture and the hierarchy of royalty, all that kind of stuff. Very medieval, though it is different enough that it feels like on its own. It's inspired by medieval, but it's not just medieval Europe. It's very much its own thing, but its roots in the medieval genre are very strong. And so George R. R. Martin knows he knew what kind of world he was setting out to make, and you can feel the identity so strongly. It doesn't feel like any other fantasy world that I've come across. It feels very differentiated, and I think that comes across really well. I'm talking about the characters and the plot intertwined, because I think the characters really do drive the plot forward in every way. There's not really a lot of characters who are just being pulled along for the ride. I think the characters really do drive the story forward. But the problem is that there's so many dang characters. There's so many dang characters and plot lines in these books that it would take me years to tell you about all of them and to give my thoughts on all of them. So you know, I'm gonna do a little bit of drive through. This probably won't be the last Song of Ice and Fire video I make, especially if you guys really like it, because there is just so much to talk about in it. But I'm just gonna kind of run through characters and kind of give my thoughts on them and the storylines and stuff. Starting with the Starks. First of all, obviously this series is known for the expansive nature of it, that there's 12 different plot lines happening in 12 different parts of the world all simultaneously. You know, that's what was really popular about the show, and obviously that's something that's really powerful and a strong identity of it. But I think the fact that we don't start that way is really awesome, because I think that would be really overwhelming. But the fact that we start with just the Stark family, there's also technically Daenerys, you know, Daenerys on the other continent. But other than that little side plot, we start just with the Starks. And even when we eventually jump to Tyrion's perspective, it's Tyrion in Winterfell. And so that makes the world doesn't feel just this expansive, huge, confusing mess at first, because we're starting in one location with one family and characters who are all connected to each other. And I think that is a really strong way to start. And then as this family gets split up across the world, and we get introduced to more characters, and then those characters eventually get point of view chapters, it's just a very natural, gradual way of discovering the world. Now, I love Brandon Sanderson. I love the Stormlight Archive and stuff. But Stormlight Archive, you know, in the first book, I think there's the three main characters, Dalinar, Kaladin, and, oh boy, I have not read them in a while. The girl, the redhead girl, her name starts with S-H, I think. Anyway, they don't even, like, meet for, like, the whole first book or whatever, which is a little bit hard. They're all near the same area, and so the culture of the nation they're all from is the same, so that's nice. They're not all from all different continents around the world. But I like that we start with all these characters who are very connected, and then slowly over time they split off, and as they split off, we split off, and so it's a very gradual break into all those, you know, dozen or so different plot lines that A Song of Ice and Fire is known for. But I love that we start with the Starks, and I mean, I love the Starks. How can you not love the Starks? I love all the Starks. I love all of them. Now, Ned, obviously the main character of the first book. I will say, unfortunately, just because I read the series so late, it was spoiled to me many years ago that Ned dies at the end of the first season. Back when the show was really popular, that was like a big deal. So I had known that going in, which was a little bit rough, but you know, reading about, you know, from this perspective of this character, I'm like, well, I know this guy's gonna bite it at the end of the first book. But Ned is obviously such a great character, and I think obviously one of the big selling points, you know, one of the things that the series is known for is killing off the main character at the end of the first book. Like, that's like, people mention that a lot or whatever. But I think it's why. Why is that so effective? I think there's a few reasons. One is George R. R. Martin wants us to never feel like our beloved characters are safe. He never wants us to feel like, oh, because they're a main character, they're going to make it out on the other end, so there's a lack of tension. He's made it very clear he will kill off anyone, whenever, so that we always feel that our characters' lives are at risk. None of our characters have superpowers. None of them are even close to invincibility. They're just regular people. A lot of them, you know, even more weaknesses or disabilities than normal people, which makes them even more vulnerable or put in very dangerous situations. So that's one reason, is for there's always tension, because you never know when a character is going to die, even if they're a main character, doesn't matter. Another reason is because Ned represents honor. He represents goodness and righteousness and honor and truth. Now, he's not a perfect guy, and obviously throughout this, and especially at the beginning of the series, you know, his one mistake is the fact that he was unfaithful to his wife and had Jon, his bastard, which, not confirmed, but we're pretty sure is not his bastard, and he did it to protect his sister, but we'll get to that. But I think that he basically represents that in the first book, and we see more and more as the first book unfolds all the corruption and horrible people. There's just so much, you know, murder and backstabbing and all this kind of stuff. All these characters are so corrupt and evil and on their own intentions. And so Ned is like, he's the shining light. He's a good father. He's an honorable man. But he has to die because it's representative, it's symbolic of saying, in this world, you can't be both honorable and alive. This world is morally gray. and every character is going to be faced with morally gray quandaries and choices, because in this world, the people in this world are just not privileged enough to be able to live life of honor and stuff, and also live, because you can't have both. You either have to survive by backstabbing people and making some bad choices, or you stay honorable, but you're gonna die. And I think that's once again goes back to why the identity of the world is so strong, is that morally gray feeling, which is also before this series, which was very absent in fantasy, which was very light and dark, black and white, good and evil. Ned Stark's death represents that. Hey, these characters, if they're gonna stay honorable to the end, they're gonna die. And so they're gonna be, it's basically, it's a promise. It's his promise to us as readers. I'm gonna face these characters with some tough choices, and clearly sometimes they're not gonna make honorable ones, because if you make an honorable choice, you're probably gonna die. People are probably gonna die. And I think Ned represents that really well, and I think that's why his death is really strong. Okay, next up, let's talk about Catelyn. I think that's how you pronounce it, Catelyn, I'm not sure. She actually is not one of my favorites. She, obviously her character as like a very protective mother who will do anything for her children, like that's a really interesting kind of character and stuff like that. But her personality, I mean, she just makes a lot of stupid decisions, and it's really easy to irritate me in a story by having a character who just makes a lot of dumb choices. Her choices that she makes are justified in the context of how we understand who she is as a person and her motivations to protect her children. But gosh, sometimes it's just so many stupid choices, just like setting Jaime free and stuff like that are just kind of frustrating. And also, she doesn't have the most likable personality, and stuff like that. So she was a character who I think is important for the story and everything like that, but really just not one of my favorites. Didn't really care a lot when she died personally. I think the sadder thing was the death of the North, at the Red Wedding, was that her and Robb's death and the Stark Bannerman death at the Twins, it represented the end of the war and the fact that Ned will not be avenged and the North will not be able to fight and get their own freedom once again as their own kingdom. That was sad to me. That was impactful to me. But her death specifically, I will also say on Robb. Robb is not a perspective character, which is a little bit interesting to me. We mostly just only see him through Catelyn's eyes. I'm wondering though if I kind of would have preferred a Robb perspective instead of Catelyn. Just because I think anytime Catelyn's just usually with other characters. She's with Ned, she's with Tyrion, or she's with Robb. Other than when she visits Renly's camp. And so because of that, I kind of just wish we had Robb perspective chapters instead, because he seems like a really cool character. But we just don't see enough of him, and his marriage, and him marrying the Westerling girl or whatever, being the whole thing that led to the Red Wedding and stuff like that. Because that's like the whole point of the Red Wedding, is that he broke the oath and whatever. But because we don't even see him meet this girl, see him marry this girl or whatever, I don't really care. It's not really important to me, and so that is a little bit frustrating, I will say. I think the show, once again, I've only seen the first 3 seasons, but it does a lot better with that. Robb is a main character. We see his romance. Obviously, it's not a Westerling. It's this other girl, this other character that they made for the show. But we see their romance. We hear their hopes and dreams, and he's very likable. Also, Richard Madden, he's just such a likable actor. So you know what I mean. That obviously plays a big role. But I think that helps add to it, whereas in the books it's just not that strong. Okay, Jon. Yeah, let's talk about Jon Snow. Jon Snow, I think, is, if you had to choose one main character for this series, I'd say it's him. He's kind of the hero of the story. Sometimes he can be a little bit of a basic kind of hero guy. But I quite liked him. I thought his storyline was quite interesting. It's far removed from my favorite part of the world, which is the politics. It's more about the supernatural elements and the main threat, which are the others, the White Walkers. And I love all the characters around him. I love Gran and Pip and all their different, Samwell and the bear, Mormont. All those characters are awesome. Oh, Aemon Targaryen. Maester Aemon, or Aemond maybe. So I love all those characters, and I love the wall. I love the whole thing. He come across a little bit like basic. Sometimes he's kind of just like really good at fighting and doing all this stuff, and he has a special connection with Ghost and all this kind of stuff. But his like journey, and then he like teams up with the wildlings and then betrays them, and then gets with Ygritte, and then she dies. That stuff is really, really interesting. And I love the fact that his story is all about honor and duty, and the fact that he wants to ride to war with Robb, but he realizes his place is on the wall, and like that stuff is super strong. All these things trying to pull him away from his duty to go for people he loves and people he cares about. But he doesn't choose those. He chooses to serve his duty instead. I think that's so interesting. I love that kind of character arc, character quandary and stuff. Which is why I'm not a huge fan of his final perspective chapter in A Dance of Dragons. I loved it the first time I read it, but the more I thought about it, actually, I really don't like how his story ended. Obviously, we still have 2 more books. I don't actually think he's really going to stay dead, because he's like the main character. Pretty sure he's supposed to be Azor Ahai. Pretty sure he's Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen's son, and all that kind of stuff. But we all know that already. So I don't think he's dead, but that last chapter was confusing to me a little bit. So to real quick recap, he is Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He's doing all this stuff to save wildlings, to prepare the wall for the others' attack. He's trying to man and repair all the different castles. Really, interesting leadership stuff that he's dealing with. He also has some of Stannis' men up at the wall, which is like really annoying him, and Melisandre's there, who's trying to tempt him with all these various things, saving his sister, all that kind of stuff. And then he gets the pink letter, right? And Ramsay Bolton is like, hey, I know you have my reek or whatever, I killed Stannis, which is not true. Obviously, he hasn't done that yet, but it's just like he's just saying it to threaten him. And he's like, I'm married to Arya, all that kind of stuff. And then Jon's like, okay, I'm going to go lead some men to go fight and save my sister from this horrible dude, because Ramsay is a horrible dude. But that just felt disingenuous to the character that we've been building up for this whole time. He constantly resists what his heart wants and wanting to protect his family or to be with Ygritte or whatever, because he has duty instead. He chooses duty every time instead. And so even though, of course, they've set up that he loves Arya a lot and he want to save his sister from this horrible dude and stuff, it's just we've established so much that he chooses duty and honor over all these other things. Well, not really honor. Sometimes he breaks his vows and stuff like that, but his duty to the Night's Watch is the most important thing to him. The fact that he would just suddenly ditch that to go attack, I don't know, it seemed kind of stupid. It didn't really seem in his character. I don't know. I like the fact that the Night's Watch guys betrayed him and killed him, because he was making a ton of decisions that the Night's Watch didn't like. He was constantly ignoring the advice of his main counselor dudes, the main steward guy and all that kind of stuff that were giving him advice, but he wanted to have his cake and eat it too, with unity between the wildlings and the Night's Watch. So that was interesting, that he paid the price for that. But I don't know, didn't really buy him ditching the Night's Watch as Lord Commander to go save Arya, get involved in all the politics and stuff of the South, just because that's been his whole arc, is not doing and denying all that stuff. So that was a little bit odd to me. Maybe I misread it or something, possibly, but it just seemed to kind of go back on his whole character that we've been building up to, which was a little bit frustrating, I would say, especially since he didn't even have any personal beef with Ramsay. I think if he had a very personal relationship with Ramsay and hated him and was his worst enemy, it would make a lot more sense. But yeah, I don't know, not super strong for me, but I like Jon, and I like all the wall stuff, for sure. Rest of the Starks, let's go for Bran real quick. Bran's a little bit of a slog in the middle once he passes over the wall and all that kind of stuff. Not a huge fan. Clearly it's building towards something important. He's going to play an important role in the Song of Ice and Fire, but not super interesting. I really don't think he's that interesting of a character. I don't think the storyline is interesting enough to intrigue me a lot. I like learning more about like the deep magic and old magic and stuff like that, the Children of the Forest and the Green Sight. Like, that's cool because we don't get a lot of supernatural elements in most of the other characters. So that is really cool. But he is just not that interesting. He's just kind of a depressed boy. And so it's kind of like, I don't know, not super interesting. His personality is not that interesting. And his storyline is just not that interesting to me. Like I said, it's just personally, I do just prefer the politics. That's just my personal taste, though, rather than the supernatural sort of stuff. So that could just be it. But he wasn't super interesting to me. I'm really curious about where the heck we're going to go with his storyline next, because this, Blood Raven stuff in the under the weirwood tree and the green sight and stuff, really interesting. But I'm so confused how the heck he's going to be involved in the rest of the story, because it's kind of getting the vibes that he's just going to become a tree and he's going to stay in this underground place for the rest of his life doing magic-y things. So a little bit confused how he's going to reconvene with the rest of the main story. But whatever. It's kind of interesting. I like that he can see through the past, and I'm pretty sure in the next book it's going to be through him we get confirmation about Jon's parentage. I thought that was going to actually happen in this book. The fact that it didn't even happen in this book, I'm like still shocked that we still haven't got confirmation on who Jon's parents are. But yeah, that's my Bran review. Not that interesting. I do like that his dream was to be a knight, but then him breaking his legs meant he had to take a different path, and that whole conflict in himself, I think that's interesting, and that's cool. Sansa, also not a huge fan. She's kind of whiny and stuff, and I know she's kind of supposed to be, but she doesn't really get much better than that. Her storyline in the 4th book is just not interesting to me. Her escape from the Purple Wedding and stuff, and then getting with Littlefinger, I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'm really intrigued, because I like Littlefinger a lot. But dang, the whole Vale stuff, pretty boring to me. Just not super interested in it. Kind of interesting, we didn't get a chapter from her in the 5th book. I thought we were going to get a chapter, at least one from her, like we did from Arya, and stuff like in like Jaime, or maybe we got 2 chapters from Jaime, but you know what I mean. Near the end of Dance of Dragons, when we get back onto the timeline that Feast for Crows ended on, it just makes me feel even more so that she's so detached from the rest of the story. I have no idea what the point of her is. I feel like she hasn't grown a ton. I thought that at this point she would be cold and calculating, or just have really tough skin, or be devising her own ploys, and she still just kind of seems like a scared girl who's being pulled along for the ride, and it's just not that interesting to me. Arya is really interesting. I really liked her at the beginning. I still like her, I think. Boy, has her story taken a very different direction than what I thought. But I love it. I love all the Jack and Hagar stuff. The Harrenhal stuff was really interesting to me. The Brotherhood with banners. We see so many interesting aspects of the world through her eyes, and that I really love. Obviously, her adventuring with the Hound, that little buddy duo, was just so great. Would never have thought in a million years that she goes to Bravos. Never would have thought that she was going to end up in Bravos. So that was super interesting to me. Once she got to Bravos, wow, the way her storyline is going, did not see it coming. She's getting trained, obviously, to become a super highly trained assassin, but she has basically lost her humanity. She kills kids, she kills the Night's Watch dude, she just kills people. And I don't know, it feels a little sad that she was this young girl from this family, and she had all these great relationships with her brother and her dad and all this kind of stuff, and then she just loses her humanity and just becomes this like cold-hearted murderous person. And obviously Arya is still in there, and she still has a heart, and she's struggling with the duality of being a faceless man who can have no connections and have no identity, with she is still Arya Stark. She still thinks about her past life and her siblings and stuff like that. But dang, I did not think she was going to turn to this cold-hearted assassin, so I'm interested to see where her story goes. And she's one that I'm really questioning on whether she's going to become a villain or not. You know, villain is a vague term in this world because there's so many people who do good and bad things. But I think I'm pretty concerned that she might become more of a bad character, just because she's kind of losing her humanity in her training to become just this calculating assassin. Okay, let's talk about Daenerys. Daenerys also, kind of like Jon, character not super interesting to me, but the characters around her are super interesting. I love Jorah. I mean, he's a pretty bad guy, manipulative dude, but I think he's interesting. Grey Worm, Barristan Selmy. Come on, Barristan Selmy, one of my favorite characters ever. I think she's surrounded by a lot of interesting characters, Khal Drogo, stuff like that. Viserys, but her herself, man, I know she's like one of the main characters. I'd say she's the secondary main character besides Jon. Boy, her storylines just drag. I'm just always more interested in what's happening in Westeros than what's happening in Essos. It was fun at the beginning, but the fact that we're in the 5th book and she's not in Westeros yet, and not only is she not in Westeros, she's not even on a boat. She's lost in the Dothraki Sea, and she just got found by another Khal. And there's going to be just more stuff there, and I just don't care. I really don't. 5th book especially, we spend so much time in Meereen, and dang, I just don't care about Meereen. I feel a little bit bad, but I just don't have enough brain space anymore to withhold information about Meereen. I already have so much knowledge on how Westeros works, the royal families, the politics, all that kind of stuff. You add on the fact that all these characters have repetitive, confusing names, and is just in a part of the world that I just don't care about. I just don't care about. I just simply don't. I don't care about what happens to the different factions on Essos. I care about what happens to the royal families in Westeros, but not in Essos. And so Daenerys, she's just not that interesting. She just isn't, personally. I just like the characters around her a lot more than I like her. I just thought we'd get a lot more cool dragon stuff than we've gotten. We just haven't gotten a lot of dragon stuff. I mean, the fighting pits thing where she rides Drogon for the first time, awesome. That chapter, awesome. Also, halfway through Storm of Swords, when she's getting the Unsullied and she trades the dragon, but then she's like, Dracarys, and then it breathes fire on the slave, and then she's just like, revolt, revolt, and she's like cracking her whip, and then all the slaves turn their masters. Dope moment. I mean, that was such a cool feeling. That moment was so awesome. So I do like definitely beats of her story, and I don't hate her. I just think she's a little bit boring, and I don't think her personality and character is as strong as other main characters. Which leads me to, I think, who is the strongest of all the personalities and motivations of characters, which is Tyrion. Tyrion is by far, I think, the most interesting and dynamic character in the whole series. Outside of his brother, which we'll get to. I think Tyrion has been interesting from the very beginning. He just has a very likable personality. Obviously, his whole thing about, being a dwarf and all that kind of stuff is just, it's really unique. It's really interesting. I think George R.R. Martin is it's very important to him to have storylines and characters of characters who have weaknesses or disabilities or something in some way that makes it hard for them to be great and make accomplishments and live up to expectations. So many of his characters have some sort of something that makes them stand out from the crowd, that makes them seen in this eyes of society less than or whatever. Jon as a bastard, Tyrion as a dwarf, Jaime losing his sword hand, the one thing that really defined him. All that kind of stuff, and it really makes these Bran being a cripple, it's stuff that Brienne being a woman who wants to be a knight, all that kind of stuff. Cersei being a woman who wants to be a ruler, but she can't be because she's a woman. He gives these characters all these weaknesses and things that they didn't choose, but was thrown upon them by fate and by the world, but it makes life extra hard for them, and then they have to overcome these things. And I think that it is strongest in Tyrion. He is so defined in the eyes of the people around him, by society, by especially his father, by him being a dwarf and him killing his mother in childbirth, which he didn't even choose, any of those things. And it has just, being ugly, all that kind of, right? That makes it even worse too, especially after he gets his nose cut off. It's so interesting and so dynamic, and the way that he struggles, he wants to be a good person. He is a good person at heart, but he's so hurt, so betrayed by so many people and by the world around him that he's so jaded, and especially in the 5th book, wow, he's so mad, especially at his siblings. And he really is that morally gray character. He is the morally gray character of the series. I think a lot of characters lean more good, a lot of characters lean more evil, but he is kind of in the middle. He really has conflict. He cares about the poor, the unfortunate. He wants to do his best to help them, right? Even with Penny, right? He in the 5th book, he's super jaded and he's super, and he's all mad and he wants to just kill everybody, especially his family. But even Penny, he can't help but take her under his wing and look after her. And even if it makes it harder to escape being a slave, he wants to keep looking after her and change his plans to account to keep her alive. I think that conflict in him is so interesting. Obviously, he also has a very charming personality and he's very witty and funny. And he's just awesome and he's so brave. I mean, the Battle of the Blackwater chapters in the end of book 2 is probably the best battle I've ever read in a book ever. I really wish we had more battles in the book series, because the way that that's written is just so amazing. But obviously it's all from Tyrion's perspective, and he's just so brave and he's such a badass in the Battle of the Blackwater. It's so awesome. But Tyrion, best character. Really irritated that he didn't end up talking to Daenerys ever in book 5. I really thought they were going to team up, and so that was unfortunate. So I guess now he's going to be in this marine battle or something. They're gearing up for a battle, him and Jorah or whatever. I don't really know. But he's definitely one of my faves. Is he my favorite? I want to say no. I'm going to say he's my second. I think my number one favorite is Jaime Lannister. Probably a lot of other people's favorite as well. The fact that he doesn't barely exist in the first 2 books, only 2 in 1 book, in A Storm of Swords, become the best character in the book series. I mean, you have to give the guy a lot of credit. Jaime Lannister is the best character, I think. His arc is so satisfying, so compelling. And most of his arc is even just in the 3rd book. Him teaming up with Brienne. First of all, one of the best duos. There's so many good duos in the book series, but the 2 of them, amazing. Their friendship is so awesome. Losing his hand. The stuff with the bear, going back to King's Landing, having to learn how to, being a White Cloak and stuff. Even though a lot of that arc stuff happened in the 3rd book, and him living under the weight of being the Kingslayer. Oh, it's so interesting. It's so compelling. But then him in the 4th book, he's back at King's Landing. He's captain of the King's Guard, and he could have kind of all he ever wanted. He's back with Cersei and stuff, but there's something missing now because of the character growth that he's gone through. He used to just, he's like, look, everyone just thinks of me as this brat, this heartless brat, Kingslayer, traitor, guy, and that's who I'll be. But he's like, but that's not really who he is. He really does want to be a good person. He really does have things that he's sensitive about and things that he cares about and people he loves and stuff. And so over the course of the 4th book, even though it's the weakest in my opinion, the 4th book is probably the most boring to me. And his storyline is not that exciting. His decline into, I'm back, I have all I've ever wanted, but I'm not happy. Why am I not happy? It feels very Prince Zuko in season 3 of Avatar to me, where Zuko he gets redeemed as the Prince of the Fire Nation. He's living in the Fire Nation. He has his girlfriend. He has all he could ever want, but he's mad, and he doesn't feel satisfied, and he doesn't know why. And I think that is the kind of same line that Jaime has in book 4. And I think his slow departure from Cersei is really satisfying. Because I hate Cersei. I hate her so much. And so to see him finally break free from her spell, when he sets free Tyrion, and then Tyrion is like, oh, Cersei's been with Lancel Lannister and both the Kettlebacks behind your back, for all you know, or whatever. And, a Moon Boy or whatever, you know what I mean? And Jaime keeps repeating that to himself over and over. George R. R. Martin's such an amazing writer. It's a way of it's such a strong way of showing him continually questioning his relationship with Cersei, and that he actually just cares about her way more than she cares about him, and all that kind of stuff, and him breaking free from her yoke. And finally, at the end of book 4, when she sends him the letter for help because she's imprisoned in the Sparrow Tower or whatever, and he burns her in the fire, it's so satisfying that he's broken free from her spell and stuff. I'm worried about where he's going next, because clearly Brienne's alive. Clearly she, to save Podrick's life, made a deal with Lady Stoneheart to get Jaime, is going to lead Jaime to his death. I really hope Jaime doesn't die. I wouldn't put it past George R. R. Martin, of course. But it seems to me that Jaime, he is the Kingslayer. I think there's still some more slaying he has to do, whether it's the King of the Others or, he slays the King of the Others, or I think he actually might have to end up killing Cersei, right? Because Cersei had that prophecy that her brother's going to kill her, end up killing her, and she always thinks it's Tyrion. But I think it's actually going to end up being Jaime, is my theory. So I hope he doesn't die. I hope Lady Stoneheart doesn't kill him, because he's finally at a point where he's becoming a hero, and it's been so satisfying. So I hope it doesn't get cut short, but also it's George R. R. Martin, so who knows. Okay, almost done. We got Cersei. I hate Cersei, but in the way that you're supposed to hate her. She's just very self-destructive. She's very power hungry and stuff. She's really interesting. The concept of she is the only one of Tywin's children, who Tywin's a great character, by the way, as well, enhanced in the show. I think Tywin's one of the best characters in the series, by the way. Charles Dance is incredible. But in the way that she really is Tywin's successor. Jaime and Tyrion don't have the political, cold, calculating heart that Tywin has, and able for him to be as successful as he is, as feared as he is. Only Cersei has that in her, that part of him in her. And she would really be the perfect successor to Casterly Rock, to Tywin Lannister. But because she's a woman, she can't inherit anything. She can't be king, she can't be Lord of Casterly Rock. And that struggle that she has, I think, is really, really interesting. Of course, she's an example of a character who is given a choice but chooses the dark path, and she lets that consume her. She lets her hatred and prejudice against her brother consume her. And so she just is self-destructive, and she just keeps making decisions out of her own selfish ambition, and she just hates everyone, you know what I mean? And it's coming back and finally biting her in the butt, and that was so satisfying in Book 5 when she had to do the Walk of Shame. Like, oh my gosh, so satisfying that her ploys and stuff are finally coming back to bite her. Though, seems like she might still have some influence up her sleeve with Lord Qyburn and, of course, Robert Strong. Yeah, definitely not zombie mount Gregor Clegane. So I think she's still going to be a big player, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. But I think she's going to die in the end, and I think she's going to get defeated, and she's going to eventually, all her ploys and her heartlessness is going to come back and come back for retribution. She's going to reap what she sows. Not a lot of important characters left. We have Davos. Love Davos. Davos is like in a sea of all these really conflicted characters and all this morally gray stuff and bad. Davos is just like a little sunspot. He's just a regular dude. He's just a regular dude who happens to have gotten influence, but he just wants to do the right thing. He just wants everyone to be together. He wants to serve his king rightly, but he also has no problem standing up for what he believes in, even if it goes up against his king. He's just so likable. Davos is so likable. I could always do with more Davos chapters. It also ties in with Stannis. I'm not going to talk about any really non-POV characters because there's so many of them, even though I have opinions on all of them. Stannis, Melisandre. I do like Stannis a lot. But yeah, Davos is just the best. I think the final main character I can think of is Theon. I want to say I can't think of... I like Brienne and stuff like that. I can't think of any other. There's like the Martell stuff that's going on, the Greyjoy stuff. I love the Greyjoys. But I think main character, I think Theon is all we have left to talk about. I might be missing like one major one, which would suck. But I love Theon. His storyline in the 5th book might be the best, in my opinion. I just love his arc over the course of it. It was scary there for a second. I thought that Theon was gone from the story. For 3rd and 4th book, he wasn't even in any of them. And then he finally shows up again in the 5th book as Reek and his identity crisis. There's so much I could talk for. Oh my gosh, I have to make another video about Song of Ice and Fire because I have so much more to talk about. But there's obviously George R. R. Martin has a very strong identity theme in the series when it comes to characters taking on different identities and who am I? Jon, is he a wildling? Is he a Night's Watch? Is he a Stark? When it comes to Arya, is she Cat of the Canals? Is she Ari? Is she Arya of House Stark? Is she nobody? Sansa, is she Sansa? Is she Elaine? But then, every Theon chapter in the 5th book, he has a new name. he's the Prince of Winterfell, he's the Ghost of Winterfell, he is Reek, until eventually he's Theon, you know, and the fact that that like identity theme is so strong in his arc in the 5th book, I love it. The fact that he is in such a horrible place at the beginning, just so tortured and stuff. God, I hate Ramsay. I mean, in a great way. Ramsay's so deliciously, he's a great villain, but Theon standing up to him and then freeing Jane Poole and stuff, and going to be reunited with his sister. And finally him being Theon at the end, you know, I'm Theon. I can't forget my name, I'm Theon. And then it's implied that Bran, through the weirwood, reminds him who he is. He's Theon. I just, even though he kind of betrayed Bran and stuff like that, I just love it. I love Theon. He's a very, very great character. I can't wait to see more of him. He's definitely had probably the roughest time of all the main characters, the things he's been through. But yeah, what an awesome character. So that's my thoughts on the characters and the plot lines and stuff like that. Obviously, I clearly have so much more to talk about because there is so much density of things and characters and stuff in this book. Last thing I wanted to touch on was, I love, because it's been so long since a book has come out, since the 5th one came out, the community has obviously come up with 100,000 different theories, and I have discovered the world of A Song of Ice and Fire theories after finishing the 5th book. And it's been such a blast, especially the YouTubers Glidus and AltShiftX, which if you know anything about A Song of Ice and Fire theories, you probably know them. Their videos have just been keeping me sustained till Winds of Winter comes out. Scratching that Song of Ice and Fire itch that I have. I did not realize how many theories there were, and also how many things I missed. There's a lot of things in the book that I totally did not get. The Abel singer dude and the washerwomen in Winterfell being Mance Rayder and the Spearwives completely went over my head. The Wyman Manderley, you know, he baked the Frey pies, went over my head. A lot of that stuff went over my head. In fact, I didn't even really get Jon's parentage, the truth about Jon's parentage, until looking at the theories about Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. And it's basically been confirmed because of the show. But that, I didn't even, there's so many connect the dots for me. I was like, dang, I did not pick up on so much. And so I want to read some more books. I want to read Fire and Blood. I want to read A World of Ice and Fire, that big guidebook. And then some like Dunk and Egg short stories or something. So I haven't gotten into any of that stuff, so I'd really be curious to go into it. But most of all, I want to run a tabletop RPG campaign in this world. There is a Song of Ice and Fire role-playing game. I know of it. I've looked at the rule book before. Don't know if I'd choose that system, but that's something that I think would be so fun. I have looked online. There's only a few Song of Ice and Fire role-playing, tabletop role-playing game campaign, like actual plays, and they are kind of low production or not very popular or whatever. So that's something I'm super passionate about. I'd love to do that. And if that's something you'd be interested in seeing, please let me know in the comments below. Because I think that would be super fun, and I haven't really seen that really done before. And obviously this is such a rich world with so much opportunity and stories that could be told in it. So if that's something you'd be interested in seeing, let me know. This was a super long video. I'm sorry if it was kind of chaotic and all over the place. I just kind of let it be more free form than one of my more structured videos. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts on the books. I want to let's talk about the books. Let's get in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if you'd be interested in an actual play tabletop game. But that's it for today. Those are my thoughts after experiencing Song of Ice and Fire for the first time.